Hello, everyone. I want to share with you something that has been troubling me lately, and I have no one to tell about it. Not my colleagues, not my wife, not a cop. I would be violating a bunch of ethical codes and possibly laws, but I am suffocating from this. I am changing names, details, locations, anything that could lead to anyone, but the essence remains. My name is Mark. Not really. I'm 42 years old, and for the last 15 of them, I've been a practicing psychotherapist in a big city on the East Coast. My specialization is anxiety disorders and PTSD. I'm not a criminal psychologist. I don't work with the courts. My office is a quiet, sunlit room on the 7th floor with a view of the park, a shelf of books by Jung and Rogers, and a ridiculous statuette of a laughing Buddha given to me by a grateful patient. I thought I had seen different facets of the human soul: pain, fear, despair. I thought nothing could surprise me anymore. I was a naive idiot. It all started 3 weeks ago, on a Tuesday. A nasty autumn rain was falling, the sky was leaden, and the last patient of the day, a certain Arthur, had booked with me as a private individual, paying for 5 sessions up front in cash. In the reason field, it said, "Existential crisis, search for authenticity." It sounded pretentious but harmless. Arthur turned out to be a man in his early 30s, unremarkable, not tall, not short, mousy hair cut short, clothes dark jeans, a gray turtleneck, a dark blue windbreaker, an invisible man. His handshake was dry and cool, his gaze direct but not challenging. He spoke in a quiet, even, almost monotonous voice. The first 2 sessions were boring. He talked about his work as an IT analyst at a large company, about mild dissociation, about the feeling that he was observing his life from the outside. I used standard techniques, tried to dig for childhood traumatic experiences, probed in the direction of his relationship with his parents. He answered politely, but you could feel it didn't really engage him. I chalked it up to classic intellectual resistance. Everything changed in the 3rd session. The rain was drumming against the window again. Arthur sat in his chair, leaning back, his fingers steepled on his knees. "Last time, Mark, you asked me about strong emotions," he began. His voice had acquired a new shade, a slight, almost intellectual interest. I thought about it for a long time. The brightest, the most authentic feelings I experience are in moments of complete control. I nodded, expecting to hear a story about a successful project or an athletic achievement. "For example, 3 weeks ago," he continued, and his gaze became absent, as if he were looking at an internal screen. "It was a Thursday, late evening. I was in that old industrial district, past the docks. There's an abandoned paint warehouse there. The air still smells acrid, even years later," he began to describe, without haste, savoring every detail, how he walked on the gravel, how the soles of his sneakers crunched, how he noticed a homeless man who had made a bed for himself in a corner behind a pile of empty barrels, a guy around 50 with a weathered face in a sweat-soaked jacket. Next to him, a bottle in a cheap paper bag. He was utterly helpless. Arthur's voice was calm, completely predictable. I approached him, said I had more booze in my car. He was happy. His name was Charlie. I remembered that. I began to feel slightly nauseous. I made a note in my notebook. Possible hallucinations, paranoia, but he continued, and the details weren't from the world of fantasy. He described how exactly the urine stank in that corner, how the rusty door creaked when he went inside, how a small tortoise-shell butterfly landed on his windbreaker, strange and absurd in that place. He told how he took out not a bottle, but a roll of packing cling film from his backpack. "First, I just wrapped his head," Arthur said with a slight smile. "One layer, then another. He didn't understand right away, thought it was a joke. Then he started making sounds, muffled, gurgling. He tried to breathe through his nose, but the film stuck to his nostrils. His body began to twitch. It was beautiful, a dance under conditions of deficit, a deficit of air, a deficit of understanding, and I was squatting, watching. I was the director of that performance. I controlled every second of his agony. I sat paralyzed. My pencil froze over the notebook. This wasn't the confession of a sick man. This was a report, a cold, precise, emotionless engineer's report. His story contained no malice, no fear, no remorse, only curiosity and aesthetic pleasure from the process. Do you understand, Mark, what kind of authenticity I'm talking about? He looked at me, and his eyes were clear, lucid. In that moment, I wasn't an actor. I was myself. I tried to play it off, said something like, "Arthur, this is a very disturbing fantasy. Let's discuss what feelings it evokes in you." He smiled softly, like an adult smiles at a child saying something silly. "It's not a fantasy, Mark. Would you like me to describe another case, a more elegant one?" And he began to talk about a woman, a young woman he met on a night bus 2 months ago. He called her Clara, described her red hair, the freckles on her nose, the worn backpack with a patch of some indie band. He followed her. He knew where she lived, what college she attended. He knew the schedule of her running workouts in the park. And he described how he cut her throat in the hallway of her own building, using a special, very sharp Philly knife that doesn't leave burrs. He didn't describe the pain or the horror. He described the color of the blood under the light of a dim energy-saving bulb in the hallway. He talked about how her body slowly slid down the wall, leaving a long, uneven mark on the dirty plaster. He talked about the sound, not a scream, but a light hiss, like from a punctured tire. It was like art, he reflected, a performance with one actor and one spectator, me. In that moment, I understood. I understood with a soul-freezing clarity. This is not a fantasy. This man is a serial killer, and he came to me not to be cured. He came to share, to have an audience. I had become his personal chronicler, his confessor in the most nightmarish sense of the word. I couldn't stop him. I was afraid. If I interrupted him, what would he do? Leave and find another listener? Or decide that I had become a threat and include me in his next performance? I spent the rest of the session on autopilot, nodding and pretending to analyze his words from a professional standpoint. When he left, I went to the window. The rain had stopped. The wet asphalt gleamed with the reflections of streetlights. I saw his inconspicuous figure exit the building and dissolve into the crowd, an invisible man. Right now, I'm sitting and writing this. Our next session is in 2 days. I can't go to the police. I have no proof, only notes protected by doctor-patient confidentiality. His name is most likely fake. He is a ghost. But the most terrible thing is not the fear. It's a strange, perverted sense of responsibility. He chose me. And now, whether we want it or not, we are connected. I have become a witness to his crimes after the fact. I am keeping his horrible secrets, and I don't know what to do next. Should I try to treat him, knowing it might be useless and dangerous? Should I try to lead him into a revelation that could be passed to the police? Or should I run, take my wife, and just disappear? He hasn't threatened me directly, but his stories are the threat. A silent, perfectly planned one. He knows that I know, and he enjoys it. This is part of his performance. And I, Mark, a 42-year-old psychotherapist with a diploma and a practice, have become his newest, most valuable prop. Story 2. I know it's already been a year since the incident, and the case has gathered dust, but I can't move on. Every time I enter my garage, I look at that very wall that separates my house from the house of Archibald Archie Finch, and I feel myself shaking. I need to talk it out, and maybe someone here will have some fresh ideas. The detectives have shelved this case, and it's burning a hole in my brain. First, about Archie himself. He was 78. lived alone in his old one-story house here in a provincial town somewhere in Ohio, a former forest ranger. He was a colorful old man, always wore a plaid shirt and carried a worn-out leather folder under his arm. He wasn't friendly, but if you started talking about nature or local history, you couldn't stop him. He was constantly searching for something in the surrounding forests. Said he was reconstructing a lost map. We all thought it was a senile obsession, like a failed treasure hunter. He went missing around October 20th of last year. He didn't show up at the local diner Dot's for his traditional Sunday breakfast. It was strange. Dot, the owner, was the first to worry. She called him, then called me. I live next door. She and I went to check on him. The door was unlocked. The silence in the house was grave, and the smell, sweetish, heavy. I still recognize it. We found him in the living room. He was sitting in his favorite leather armchair, his back to the door. At first, I thought he had fallen asleep, but when we stepped forward, God! The body of Archibald Finch was sitting in the armchair. It was dressed in his usual plaid shirt, but there was no head on his shoulders. It was gone. Nowhere. No signs of a struggle. No blood on the furniture or walls. Just clean. Too clean. As if someone had done their job with surgical precision and cleaned up after themselves. The only thing that betrayed the horror of what had happened was a dark stain on the collar of his shirt and the faint, coppery smell of blood mixed with the smell of the old house. The police came, of course. They stirred up the whole precinct, searched everything, the house, the shed, the garden. Nothing. No fingerprints, except ours and his. No signs of a break-in, no murder weapon. Archie's head had just vanished, as did the one who did it. And now, about what keeps me awake at night. I was there when they searched the house. I brought coffee to the cops, tried to help. And in the bedroom, under an old Persian rug, we found it, a floorboard. It wasn't like the others, lighter without a layer of old paint, and with a barely noticeable groove on the side, so you could pry it open with a fingernail. The lead detective, Mike Ross, carefully lifted it. Underneath was a small niche, hollowed out in the floor joists. Empty. But here's the main thing. When Ross put the board back in place, it made a soft click. He lifted it again and showed me. On the inner side, in the middle, was a fresh crack. Not old, not dusty. A clear mark from something heavy having been placed on the board, causing it to break. Something that was no longer there. Ross looked at me then and said, "It seems Mr. Finch kept something valuable here. Something heavy enough to break an oak board. And someone came and took it. Probably the same person who took his head. And that's it. That's all the leads they have. Nothing more. In a year, there have been no witnesses, no ideas, no anonymous calls, no suspicious individuals, no traces of his lost map. But I think about it constantly. What was in that niche? Gold, documents, or was it that very map? The killer took not only the head, but also what Archie had so carefully hidden. But why did he need the head? To hide the cause of death? After all, without the head, the pathologist couldn't determine the exact cause. Or was it some kind of ritual? But Archie had no enemies. He was just a strange old man with a secret. This story has no end, no full body, no head, no motive, no killer. There's only an empty niche in the floor and a broken board that screams that something was there. Something for which someone was ready to commit such cruelty and such horror, impeccable in its cleanliness. Sometimes I think I hear the floorboards creaking in his house, but the house is empty and sealed. It's just the wind, or my paranoia. If you have any thoughts at all, I'm listening, because the local cops have already given up, but I haven't. I can't live with this hole in the story, right next door, literally. Story 3. Hello, Reddit. I didn't sleep all night, and I don't think I'll ever sleep properly again. Last night, I became an accomplice to a murder. Not directly, of course. I didn't hold the knife, but my inaction, the inaction of myself and 1,000 other people, made it possible. I'm talking about Alex Rider's stream. You've probably heard. The news has already picked it up. Famous blogger found dead in the abandoned Blackwood Manor. But the news doesn't convey a tenth of the horror I felt watching it live. For those who don't know, Alex Rider, known online as Risk Raider, was the guy who did things an ordinary person wouldn't have the guts to do. He climbed unfinished skyscrapers, explored abandoned mines. His last viral video was 12 hours in a morgue supposedly haunted by ghosts. It was all staged, of course. Special effects, actors, editing. We all understood that, but we enjoyed playing along. He was a master at creating atmosphere. His 24 Hours in Blackwood project was announced as his most ambitious and dangerous stunt yet. Blackwood Manor is a grim Victorian-era building on the outskirts of our town, Old Mill, a place with a history. In the 1920s, it was owned by an industrialist named Elias Blackwood, who was rumored to be into the occult. They say he sacrificed vagrants in his basement. He was later found dead under strange circumstances, and the servants fled, spreading tales of whispers in the walls and figures in the mirrors. The house had changed many owners since. No one stayed for more than a year. For people like Alex, it was the perfect place. I'd been subscribed to Alex for about a year. I liked his humor, his silly reactions to the paranormal phenomena he staged himself. It was my way to unwind after 10 hours in an open space office where I, a web developer named Mark, spent my time making other people's websites brighter and more functional. His streams were my window to a world where something existed beyond lines of code and deadlines. The stream started at exactly 6:00 p.m. local time. Alex looked excited. He was standing in front of the manor with a camera on his helmet and 2 portable cameras he'd set up inside. He was joking, interacting with the chat. I remember someone wrote, "If you don't make it out, we'll take your merch as souvenirs." He laughed. "I don't doubt it, guys, but don't worry. I have an escape plan if things get too hot." The first few hours were routine. He wandered through dusty rooms, commented on the peeling wallpaper, the broken furniture. He showed us strange symbols drawn on the walls in the living room. "Look here, seems like the local Satanists were having fun," he said, laughing. The cameras provided a stable picture, with only occasional interference due to a weak signal. But by midnight, something changed. Alex's jokes became more forced. He started flinching at the ordinary creaks of the old house. "Guys, was it just me, or did something fall on the second floor?" he asked, his voice less confident than usual. The chat exploded. "It's him! The Blackwood ghost is on the hunt. Spectral shift, I'm detecting one." We all, including me, thought it was part of the show. His acting had just gotten more convincing. At 2:34 a.m., he was sitting in that same living room with the symbols. He was eating an energy bar, and his hands were shaking. Not that slight, staged tremor, but a real, nervous one. "You know, guys," he said quietly, dropping his stage voice for a moment. "It's damn cold in here. I checked the thermometer. It's only 12 degrees C, but it feels below 0. Then he suddenly turned around. "Who's there?" he shouted into the empty hallway. The chat filled with LOL and boo. An hour before the tragedy, around 4 a.m., one of the portable cameras, the one he'd placed on the stairs to the second floor, suddenly cut out. Alex swore. "Damn it! Either the battery died or the ghosts don't like technology." He tried to joke, but there was panic in his voice. He went upstairs to check on it. It was dark up there, his flashlight beam only illuminating patches of the gloom. And then he stopped. "What's that door? I didn't see it yesterday." It was a small, inconspicuous door at the end of the hallway, almost blending into the wall. The chat whispered, "Don't go in. It's a trap. What a cool plot twist." We all thought he'd put it there himself, part of the set. He opened the door. Behind it was a narrow descent into a basement. Not the large one he'd shown earlier, but a secret one. The air from it was stale, smelling of mold and something else. Swedish, rotten. Alex went down. It was there, in that stone cage, that it all began. He swept his flashlight around. The floor was earthen. There were some rags in the corner, and on a table. On the table were bones, not chicken bones. They looked old, human. The chat went wild. "Wow, how did they make those? This is excellent." I personally wrote, "Finally some real horror. Well done, Alex." Alex moved closer. "What the—" he began and fell silent. He leaned over the table. His breathing quickened. "Guys, this isn't a prop." His voice was a whisper, full of genuine animal terror. "These bones, they're real." And that's when the chat split in half. One half was spamming, "Goat, Oscar for him." The other half started to worry. "Alex, get out of there. This isn't funny anymore." But it was too late. From the shadows, beyond the reach of his flashlight, a figure emerged. I still see it when I close my eyes. It wasn't a ghost in a shroud. It was a person, tall, very thin, in dark grime-encrusted clothes. Its face was hidden in deep shadow, but I saw its hands, long, pale, with dirty nails. In one of them, it held something long and shiny, like a scythe blade or a large knife. Alex recoiled. "Hey, who are you?" His voice cracked into a falsetto. The figure didn't answer. It just took a slow step forward. "What do you want?" Alex screamed. He was backing away, the camera on his helmet shaking, capturing glimpses of the ceiling, the dirty floor. We were seeing the world through his eyes, and that world was turning into hell. And then the figure lunged at him. It was nothing like a staged fight. There were no sound effects of punches, muffled for the camera. It was a fast, fierce, predatory attack. A blood-curdling scream tore from Alex. A real scream, the kind that rips from your throat when you realize you're about to be killed. The camera shook wildly, the picture becoming a blur of shadows and light. All we could hear were his gurgles, the heavy, snorting breath of the attacker, and dull, wet sounds, impacts. The chat froze for a second, then exploded. "Wow! This is the best thing I've ever seen. Amazing makeup. The writer is a genius. Alex, you're the best." I sat there, gripping the edge of my desk. I couldn't breathe. Something inside me was screaming that this was wrong. Something was off about those sounds. That scream. This wasn't a game, but my mind, conditioned by years of watching his stunts, refused to believe it. "No," I whispered to myself. "It's Alex. It's his show. He always does this. It'll be over soon, and he'll laugh." The camera feed fell. Now we could only see the wooden beams of the basement ceiling. The sound stopped. Silence fell. Absolute, crushing silence, broken only by a weak, ragged breathing not Alex's, someone else's. Then, footsteps. They approached the camera. A shadow leaned over the lens. The screen went black. The stream cut off. The chat was confused for a few seconds. Then messages started appearing. Lame ending. Great stream. Waiting for the behind the scenes. The set design was fire. I sat there, staring at the black screen. There was a coldness in my chest. I felt nauseous. I wanted to believe it was a show, but that scream, it kept echoing in my head. I reached for my phone. My finger hovered over the number 9. Call the police? And say what? I saw a blogger get murdered live on stream? What if it's a prank? They'd laugh at me. They'd laugh at Alex. I put the phone down. I'll wait until morning, I thought. If he doesn't make contact, then... In the morning, the news exploded. The body of famous blogger Alex Ryder discovered in Blackwood Manor. Police are investigating a murder. My world turned upside down. I didn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I rewatched the stream recording over and over, trying to find a hint, a clue we all missed. Those bones were real. That man in the basement, he was real. We, thousands of people, sat and watched as a living person was killed. We applauded. We admired the special effects. I feel terrible, not just because I did nothing, but because at some point, deep down, I too was intrigued. I was thrilled. I was part of the spectacle. I consumed someone's death as entertainment. The police don't know about the stream yet. The server he was streaming on was anonymous. The recording was already deleted by the mods for violating platform rules. All I have left are my memories. And the guilt. We were all there, we all watched, and we all, in a way, let it happen. Because in our world, the line between show and reality has become so thin that we've stopped seeing the difference. And now, someone is dead. And I'm sitting here, in my safe apartment, writing this post, realizing that I'm not just a viewer. I'm a witness, and my silence has become my sentence. Story 4. Hello everyone, my name is David Morrison. I'm writing this because I hope this story will make someone more vigilant. This isn't your typical scary story. This happened to me, my wife Sarah, and our 6-month-old son Luke. We bought our house in Maine a little over a year ago. An old 2-story Victorian style an architect's dream, which is what I am. It was sold after the death of its owner, a certain Arthur Clayton. The agent said he was a loner, had no relatives left, and the house was sold off to cover debts. We were thrilled. Luke's nursery was my personal project. I did the renovations myself, painted it myself, assembled the furniture myself. I installed the baby monitor, a Motorola, with night vision and a motion sensor personally, positioning it to see the entire perimeter of the room, especially the crib. The first month was perfect. Then the night shadows began. The first time I saw it, I had gotten up for a drink of water. The phone on the nightstand vibrated softly. A notification. Motion detected. On the screen, a black and white image of Luke's room, and on the wall, right by his crib, a clear, blurry shadow of a person. Tall, thin. I froze. My heart sank. I rushed upstairs, burst into the room. No one. The window was closed. Luke was asleep. I checked the closet, looked under the crib. Empty. Sarah, awakened by my running, said I was imagining things, that it was probably a shadow from the moon or a passing car, but it happened again. The next night, and again. Always between 2 and 2:30 a.m. Always the same shadow. It just stood there, motionless. I started saving the recordings. I rewatched them 10 times over. The shadow didn't move. It was just there, like part of the decor. I told Sarah. We argued. She accused me of paranoia, said I was working myself up because of my job. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe a firmware glitch? I reinstalled the camera's software. Nothing. Maybe a cobweb? I cleaned the lens. The shadow returned. I turned the camera off at night and woke up from anxiety, unable to sleep, listening for every sound. The breaking point came 3 weeks ago. A notification. 2:18 a.m. I opened the app. The shadow was in place. But this time, something was different. I saw the shadow of a hand blurry, shapeless, slowly, almost ceremoniously, extend from the main silhouette towards Luke. It didn't touch him, just hovered an inch above his sleeping body. Something snapped in me. It wasn't fear anymore, but rage. A deaf, blind rage. I didn't just jump out of bed, I erupted. I grabbed not a baseball bat, but a heavy metal flashlight from the garage. I didn't run upstairs, I flew, taking 3 steps at a time. I didn't open the nursery door. I smashed it open with my shoulder, slamming it against the wall. I turned on the light. I was screaming, "Come out, you bastard!" Luke started crying. The room was empty. Sarah, frightened, stood in the doorway. "David, you've lost your mind. There's no one here." But I had seen the recordings. I knew I wasn't crazy. The next morning, I took Sarah and Luke to her sister's. I told her we had wiring problems and it wouldn't be safe. A lie. But I knew I had to finish this. Alone. I returned to the quiet, empty house. My first target was the wall where the shadow fell. I cleared everything out of the room, the crib, the dresser, the chair. I bared the floor and the walls. I tapped on the drywall, searching for hollow spots, and I found one, right behind the spot where the linen closet, which was original to the room, stood. The sound was dull, solid, but in one corner hollower. I moved the closet. It was incredibly heavy. Behind it were the same wallpapers as in the whole room. But upon closer inspection, I saw a faint rectangular outline. I ran a knife along it. A light press, and the blade went through. It wasn't a wall, but a thin layer of plywood, covered with wallpaper. My hands were shaking. I inserted a crowbar into the crack and pulled. There was an ugly sound of tearing wood. Behind the plywood gaped blackness, not just a cavity in the wall, but a neat vertical passageway wide enough for a person. It smelled of dust, old wood, and something else. Mustiness, sweat. Taking the flashlight, I stepped inside. It wasn't just a gap between walls. It was a whole network. Narrow corridors leading to different parts of the house. A staircase descending behind the walls of the first-floor living room. And right behind the nursery was a room, about 2 by 2 meters, and it was inhabited. A sleeping bag on the bare floor, a folding gas burner, empty tin cans neatly stacked in a corner, water canisters, a waste bucket, and a wall covered in photographs and drawings. The photographs were old, from the 80s and 90s. They showed the same man, thin, with sad eyes. He was in this house. He was painting the fence, sitting on the porch, Arthur Clayton, and next to them, drawn with a pencil with a sickening photographic accuracy, were us, me leaving for work, Sarah watering the flowers in the garden, and Luke. Dozens of drawings of Luke. He was sleeping. He was eating. He was playing in his playpen. He was lying on the changing table. The last drawing was dated the previous night. It depicted that very scene, the shadow reaching out its hand. But the most terrifying thing was in the corner. There was a folder. In it were official documents. Adoption applications from various agencies dated 20 years ago, stamped everywhere with denied reasons, unstable financial situation, unsatisfactory housing conditions, failed psychological evaluation. Among the papers was a medical report, diagnosis, infertility, psychotherapy recommended. This wasn't just a squatter. This was Arthur Clayton, the former owner, a man who had lost everything, the hope for a family, his home, and he had returned to his only refuge, and our son. Our son had become his obsession, the embodiment of his unfulfilled dream. He didn't mean him harm. He was caring for him, stood by his crib like a guard, like the ghostly father he never got to be. I called the police. They set up a stakeout. They caught him that same night when he tried to enter the house through his passage from the basement. He didn't resist. When they led him away, he was calm. He just turned and looked at me, and he said, he didn't cry. I made sure he was okay. We weren't in the house for 2 weeks. We hired specialists who opened up all the walls. It turned out Arthur had spent years, while still the legal owner, building this network of passages, preparing a refuge for himself in case everything finally fell apart, and it had. We sold the house, moved to a new building with an open floor plan, where there isn't a single unnecessary wall, but I still can't sleep. Every night I check the camera in Luke's room. It's always empty, but I now know that the scariest monsters aren't the ones that come from the other world. They are born from human despair, from broken lives and shattered hopes, and they can live for years within the walls of your home, breathing your air, watching your happiness, which was stolen from them. And that thought is far more terrifying than any shadow.